Do you want to sound more natural when you're giving your opinions in English? In today's video, I will share 50 essential phrases that you can use to agree and disagree just like a native speaker. Whether you want to agree confidently or disagree politely, these phrases will make you sound more fluent and authentic in everyday conversation. I have divided the phrases into useful categories, so let's get started with the first category of phrases. These phrases can be used when you want to agree with someone. They are a bit more interesting than simply saying, I agree. First, we can say, I completely agree. This makes it sound like we agree more strongly. Next, you're absolutely right. Or you could simply say, you're right, but if we add absolutely, it makes us sound more enthusiastic or gives it a bit of extra emphasis. You're absolutely right. Next, you can say, that's true. Or if you want to add emphasis, that's so true. And pay attention to the words that I stress in this phrase. Because I'm giving emphasis to the word so, I have to stress that word when I say it. That's so true. Using stress in this way will help you to sound more like a native speaker when you use these phrases. The next one is, I'm with you on that, which simply means that I agree with what you just said. We could also say, I see your point. If you say, I see your point, it means you understand what the person said and you think that it is a good idea or a good point that they just made. So it's another way to express agreement. Yes, I see your point. You could also say, I think so too. This is a way to say that we have the same opinion as someone else. If your friend tells you something that they think, you can agree by saying, I think so too. Another one that native speakers use all the time, that makes sense. We can use this to agree with an idea that someone had or a suggestion that they made, or just in general to express the fact that we agree with the other person. Yes, that makes sense. If someone says something particularly interesting that maybe you hadn't thought of before and you want to show you agree, you can say, you've got a good point there, meaning the point they just made is a good one and you agree with it, even though maybe you hadn't thought of it before. You could also say, I feel the same way. If someone just gave an opinion on a topic and you have the same opinion, instead of saying, I have the same opinion as you, a more natural way to express that would be to say, I feel the same way. And the final phrase in this category is exactly. This is a good one if someone makes a really good point and you want to show enthusiastically that you agree, you can say exactly. Next, let's look at some phrases you can use to strongly agree. So if you really want to emphasize that you agree with the other person, here are some things you can say. The first one is absolutely. Absolutely is a bit like saying exactly, but it adds more emphasis. You don't just agree, you really agree. Yes, absolutely. You could also say no doubt about it. If there's no doubt about it, that means there is absolutely no reason to doubt or question the opinion. Yep, you're completely right, there's no doubt about it. Another nice one to say that you really agree is I couldn't agree more. This shows that you really support the other person's opinion. I couldn't agree more. The next one is quite simple, but also expresses strong agreement. Definitely. It's a bit like saying absolutely. It's still a strong way to really show that you agree with someone. If they make a good point, you can say definitely. You could also say you're totally right. By using the word totally, we're showing emphasis or strong agreement. So you could agree by simply saying you're right, but to show that you strongly agree, you can say you're totally right. And again, notice that I stress that word totally when I say that sentence. Another use of the word totally is I'm totally on board with that. If you say that you're on board with something, it means that you agree with it. It can be used when someone makes a suggestion, gives an idea for a plan, or just tells you an opinion that you want to agree with. You can say, I'm on board with that, or to show strong agreement, I'm totally on board with that. Another nice one to show that someone is right about something is to say, you're spot on. Saying that someone is spot on just means that they are right. So they maybe give an opinion about something, or they have an idea that is right, it's correct. You can say, you're spot on, meaning you are absolutely correct in what you're saying. Another nice one, which is kind of like an idiom, you hit the nail on the head. If you hit the nail on the head, again, it means that you get something completely right. If someone does a good job at summarizing or describing a situation, they get something really right, you can say that they hit the nail on the head. A good way to remember the meaning of this idiom is to imagine it literally. You have a nail and a hammer, and you go to hit the nail with the hammer, and you hit it exactly right. It's perfect, meaning you hit the nail on the head. You could also say, that's exactly what I was thinking, to show that you were already thinking or having the same opinion that someone else just told you. Ah, yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. And the use of the word exactly helps place more emphasis and therefore agree more strongly. The last one in this category is without a doubt. It's like saying there's no doubt about it. It's just another way of expressing the same idea. And again, it shows strong agreement. What the other person said is absolutely true, without a doubt. If you're enjoying this video and finding these phrases useful, please take a quick moment to hit that like button and then subscribe to my channel. I have lots more videos just like this, which give you useful phrases that native speakers use all the time. So why not join me by subscribing to my channel? And I hope to see you there. Now let's continue with the video. We're moving on now to the next category of phrases, which are things you can say to disagree with someone. The first one, I'm not sure I agree with that. This one expresses some doubt about what the other person said. We're not strongly disagreeing, we're just saying we're not sure if we agree with what they said. I'm not sure I agree with that. You could also say, I don't think that's true. Be careful if you just say to someone, that's not true. It can sound quite direct, depending on the context, maybe even a little rude. But to soften it, you could say, I don't think that's true. Another one, I see your point, but I disagree. This is quite a respectful way to disagree with someone because we acknowledge that they have a point, maybe they have reasons for their opinion, but we want to say that we disagree. I see your point, but I disagree. Another one, I'm afraid I don't agree. This is a bit more polite than just saying I don't agree or I disagree because we've softened it with the word I'm afraid. If you put I'm afraid before you say something, it softens it and makes it sound less direct. I'm afraid I don't agree. You could also say I don't see it that way. So if someone gives you an opinion on something and you have a different perspective, you can say I don't see it that way, or I see it a different way. Another good one to disagree is I'm not convinced. This isn't showing that you strongly disagree, it just shows that you're a bit uncertain, you're not sure about what the other person said. I'm not convinced, meaning you'll need to say more things to make me agree with you. You could also say, I don't think that's the case. For example, if a friend is describing their perspective or their view of a particular situation and you don't really agree with that perspective, you can say, I don't think that's the case. Another useful one, which is quite common in native speaker English, is I beg to differ. It sounds a little bit strange and maybe even old-fashioned and could be seen as a little bit formal, but it basically means I disagree. It's not especially strong, it's simply expressing disagreement. The next one is, that's not how I would put it. Maybe someone's describing a situation and they see it in a certain way or from a certain perspective, but you would describe that situation in a different way, from a different viewpoint. You can say, that's not how I would put it. The final one of this category is a simple one, but more interesting than saying I disagree. I can't agree with that. It's not especially strong disagreement, but you are simply pointing out that what the other person said is not something you agree with. I can't agree with that. Now let's move on to look at phrases which can be used for strong disagreement. The first one is, I completely disagree. You can see that we've made our disagreement stronger by using the word completely. You could also insert totally in that phrase and it would have the same effect. I totally disagree, or I completely disagree, showing that you really strongly disagree with the other person. You could also say, I can't agree with that at all. Remember in the previous category we had, I can't agree with that, but we've made it stronger by adding at all. You'll notice in this category that I add at all to some of these phrases, and that just emphasizes a strong disagreement. Nope, I can't agree with that at all. The next one, I really don't agree with that, or I really disagree with that. The word we've used to emphasize our disagreement here is really. So we've inserted that into the phrase to show that we strongly disagree. The next one is, I'm afraid that's just not true. Now with this one, we've softened our disagreement so that we don't sound rude by using the phrase I'm afraid, but we've also used the word just to show emphasis. I'm afraid that's just not true. And notice how I stress the word just in the phrase to give it more emphasis. I'm afraid that's just not true. The next one, that's not how I see it at all. So again, we've got that at all added to the phrase, that's not how I see it, to show that it's a strong disagreement. The next one, I'm not buying that at all. Again, we've added at all to show emphasis. If you don't buy something, it means that you're not convinced by an argument. So I'm not buying that at all. We're not literally talking about buying items. It's kind of like an idiom in this case, so it doesn't have a literal meaning. But if you say, I'm not buying that, you mean, I'm not convinced by that. I don't think it's true. You need to do more to convince me. The next one, I think that's totally wrong. Now this is quite direct and quite strong, so be careful who you say this to. The use of the word totally adds emphasis. You could also say completely. I think that's completely wrong, but you can see how we are stressing our point and showing that we disagree strongly. The next one, I disagree entirely. So there is our emphasis word here, entirely. I don't just disagree, but I disagree entirely. You could also say, I entirely disagree. It basically means I disagree a lot. The next one is a good colloquial phrase. It's a flat out no from me. If something is a flat out no, it means it's an absolute no. No negotiations. I definitely disagree. I can't have the same idea as you. It's a flat out no from me. Very strong disagreement there. And the last phrase in this category, that's not the case at all. And again, I've added at all to this phrase to emphasize that I'm disagreeing strongly. So if someone describes a situation and I think they've really got this wrong, I say, no, that's not the case at all. The final category is phrases you can use to disagree politely. When you are having a conversation and you want to disagree, sometimes you need to give your opinion but not be too direct so you don't offend the other person. So let's look at polite ways to disagree. I understand where you're coming from, but in this phrase, we are acknowledging the other person's point of view, which means we're being respectful and polite, but then we're giving an opportunity to disagree by giving our own opinion. I understand where you're coming from, but I disagree because, and then you can give your reasons. The next one is very similar. I see your point, but I think. So again, we're acknowledging the other person's opinion. I see your point, but I think, and notice how I stress the word I to emphasize a contrasting idea. This is what you think. Now I'm going to talk about what I think. And that's why I stress the word I. I get what you mean. However, this is very similar to the previous two phrases, but it's less formal. So you wouldn't say this to someone in a professional situation. It's more useful for friends or family. I get what you mean. It means I understand you. However, and then I'm going to contrast with my own point of view. That's an interesting point, but again, we're being respectful and we're even saying that the other person's point is interesting, but then we've said but to introduce our own idea. And notice with all these phrases, I give myself an opportunity to give my idea. I could simply say I disagree. That's an interesting point, but I disagree. I see your point, but I disagree. If you want to keep it more simple, you can say that. I respect your opinion, but I believe. This one's a bit more formal. I respect your opinion. We're being very respectful here. And then we're saying I believe. I believe is a more formal way of saying I think. I'm not sure I agree, but I see your perspective. This is a good one if you don't want to elaborate on your own opinion. You want to say you disagree, but you're doing it respectfully. I'm not sure I agree, but I see your perspective. That's a valid point, but I think if we say something is a valid point, it means that they have a fair point. They've made a fair argument. But again, I'm going to give myself a chance to disagree. I can see how you might think that, but... So this is a good one because we really are understanding that someone might have an opinion and there's a reason for their opinion. But again, I'm going to disagree. I can see how you might think that, but I'm not entirely sure about that. But this is a good one because we're not flat out disagreeing. We're just saying that we're not sure about what they said. I'm not entirely sure about that. And the final one, I hear what you're saying, but I disagree because, once again, we're acknowledging the person's opinion. I hear what you're saying, which means I understand and acknowledge your opinion, but I disagree because, and we're going to say why we disagree. So there you have it. You just learned 50 different phrases that you can use to agree and disagree. And these phrases are used all the time in daily conversation. Now, if you're looking to learn more phrases that native speakers use all the time, then I've got just what you're looking for right here.